Colorado lawmakers rejected a voluntary measure on Thursday to give food producers the option of labeling products that do not include genetically modified ingredients. One of the biggest issues the lawmakers said in implementing this would be that the state would then have to set up possible fines or other penalties for retailers that mislabeled food. Several states around the country have taken action or tried to take action to require labels for genetically modified food. However, the Food and Drug Administration already allows for voluntary labeling. For those of you who are thinking GMOs don't have to be labeled, OMG, is this bad? To help answer that question, we're joined earlier by Elizabeth Kucinich. She's the executive producer of GMO OMG, a new documentary highlighting these very issues. I first asked her what message the film is trying to convey.
The film's actually a very, very beautiful film that follows the journey of a father of 3 children, and it's really his exploration of the food supply. And we want to raise awareness of the fact that GMOs exist and what they are and how they're produced and the questions that surround them, and give people the opportunity to make their own conclusions.
Now, there's been many states, most recently Colorado, who've been struggling with legislation for labeling GMOs, and very few have been successful in this endeavor. Why is it so difficult to get GMO labeling on our food?
Yeah, well, there's big companies and organizations like the Grocery Manufacturers Association that are really pushing back to try to keep consumers in the dark. And you know, while there's questions around GMOs and things, we as consumers really have the right to know what we're eating, and that's what I personally advocate.
Now, labeling, should that be a state or a federal issue?
Well, you know, state by state, the movement is really building. We had more than 26 states last year put in legislation and try to push for this. And that is really causing a national conversation to develop, and it's coming to Washington, D.C. So, you know, one really balances the other. For, you know, ease of use and for large food companies and for, you know, supermarkets and things, having federal legislation is obviously what is necessary for the entire state of the union.
Now, General Mills is looking to take this labeling issue into its own hands. They've announced that they're going to remove bioengineered ingredients from Cheerios and then label them as GMO free. However, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, essentially all oat varieties now planted commercially have been genetically modified in some way. Now, because of decades of crossbreeding and genetic manipulation, is it even possible to find food that's truly non-GMO?
Okay, well, there's a difference between breeding and hybridizing a seed to actually manipulating in a laboratory. And so, yeah, it is absolutely possible for people to find foods that's non-GMO. Of course, you know, for thousands of years, people have been evolving plant varieties in a certain way of, you know, cross-pollination and things. But with regards to genetic engineering, that's just something that's been happening over recent decades, and that really is the questionable science that we would like to see really labeled and more.
But where do you draw the line on labeling?
Well, the labeling would be on the actual manipulated product. So, you know, that which is taking the genome and really manipulating it in a false environment.
And there's not much research available on the health effects of this freaking food, if you will. One, why hasn't there been a comprehensive study done? And two, what do we know about the safety of eating GMOs?
So the area around, you know, labeling of foods, if something is proven to be unsafe, then it should be taken off the market. With labeling, it's just literally a right to know issue. You have the right to know. We really need to make sure that the regulators do call for longitudinal studies into some of the effects of these things. But I think that labeling really is a first step to make sure that we know as consumers what we are eating. And then moving forward, of course, you know, my husband since the 1990s introduced legislation in Congress calling for more review of this technology, looking at the safety aspects of it, both environmental and health-wise, but we still to see that actually coming into existence.
And now, one issue that the film does talk about is the effects of the GMO seed dealers, what they're having on small farming businesses, and they compared it to Walmart on mom and pop stores. So what are these big agriculture companies, what effects are they having on independent farmers?
So, you know, the seed patenting is really an issue to be looked at. Cross-pollination issues, farmers who have grown conventionally or organic, finding that their fields are actually contaminated with a genetically modified gene that's coming from another farmer's field. They're under threat because companies such as Monsanto are coming in and claiming rights to those seeds. We need to make sure that our seed sovereignty is there, that farmers really have the ability to grow their own crops and to be safe from the pollution of other crops coming in and the cross-contamination there. Now, USDA, they purport something which is really that these things can live side by side, that you can have conventional and organic on one field and you can have a genetically modified crop on the other. But we need to make sure that people really understand that we live in a biosphere that's interconnected, and that what happens in one field does actually through pollen drift, and also if you're spraying herbicides or pesticides onto one crop, then it can actually blow over onto somebody else's. So we need to make sure that farmers are protected from those kinds of events.
Thank you. This is Elizabeth Kucinich. She's the executive producer of GMO OMG.